And here we continue going here, and we've got to switch from my camera to my iPhone because my memory card ran out. So my apologies if the video quality is a bit less. So this is a Healey 104, and this was the first of the big Healeys. It was a Jerry Coker designed car that was shown at, I think, Earl's Court in 1953, I think. And just badged as a Healey, but I think it was Len Lord from Austin saw the car, they made a deal, and it became the Austin Healey. What a pretty car! I've had a couple of these, and I really love them. The bodies are almost never good because they're steel and aluminum, and they suffer from electrolytic corrosion. So I never really had a great one myself, but I'd like to get one again. So these are four-cylinder cars. And it's a 2.4 liter big long stroke torquey engine, and this car is a 1954, so they would have come out in 53, and then in 1956 this car would have become the 106, and it would have got a six-cylinder engine that actually wasn't even as good as this one. So the louvered hood is from something, and the leather bonnet strap is from a 100M, and the M was the performance variant for the car, and a lot of these cars have been modified because it's like super cool, of course. And there was also a 100S, which you can tell because it has the oval grille, and they only made about 30 of those, and they're $300,000 or $400,000 cars now. But Healey 104 is really special, lots of fun. You know, one of the great features of it that was abandoned with a six-cylinder car is, of course, the folding windscreen, which is kind of useless because the wind just comes right over that and straight in your forehead. But it makes for a particularly rakish machine. There was BN1s and BN2s, and the BN1s had a 3-speed gearbox. It started off as a 4-speed gearbox, but it came from a truck or something, and first gear was ridiculously low, so they blanked it off, and they put an electric overdrive in it, and that was a BN1, and the BN2s had a 4-speed gearbox. So Austin Healey 104, very beautiful. And at this show we also have a whole bunch of course, great old bikes. And I'm not a bike motorcycle rider or expert, but I have half an idea what this is, and this is a Honda CB750. So this would have been, and it's significant because it would have, and it dates from, I don't know, maybe 76 or 77 or something like that. And when this bike came out with a double overhead cam, inline for disc brakes, this was the beginning of the end for the British motorcycle business. I mean, it offered, I don't know, something like 140 mile-an-hour performance and the reliability and drivability that basically the British and Italians could only dream about. A really significant piece. I'd even like to have it just because I'm a huge Honda fan, and I know how good the engineering has always been with the Hondas, and they have such a great record of going from basically scooters to dominating the Isle of Man races in the early 60s, completely dominating, winning the top 3 spots in the 250 and 125, 250, and 500cc categories, and in that race. And I have a deep respect for the mark. Anyway, hang on just a second. Hey, Bill, what year is this Honda here? Late 60s, and that was the first of the
yes, the 754.
The first of the 754, right?
Yeah.
And so, and you're on YouTube right now. Tell me what my friend Bill, who knows everything about bikes.
No, I don't know anything about those, sadly.
What do you think this bike did for the industry?
Revolutionized it.
It did. Yeah. So just
actually, BSA bought one silently and on the quiet and took it apart.
So these fellas cried.
Couldn't believe that this machine was put into production. You know. So.
Okay, well there you have it from Bill. Okay, so this is what we call a body on white, and this is an Isogriffo, so another one of the Italian American hybrids. The steel car, and it would have had Corvette engines. In this case, a 7-liter 427, I believe, engine, and this is what happens if you go on eBay and you find something with shiny paint and it looks good at 72 DPI, and then you take it apart, and you find the body in Swiss cheese. Now, I'm not saying this guy who owns this car did that, but this is what cars can look like, you know, once you dip them or sandblast them. So this is probably about a 700 or 800 hour job. So the guy who's doing this is a guy named Dave Ryan, who is a friend of mine, and he's going to do the body on my 59 Aston Martin. And basically it's 700, 800 hours of work. And so, you know, he would have made from scratch that quarter panel from a sheet by shaping the metal and stretching it and doing whatever they do. I still don't really understand how they do it. And then making these panels again from scratch, shaping the metal, where basically you gather the underside of the metal and stretch the top of it to create the curves, and then spot welding all the pieces in, and then making the inner fender arches and basically rebuilding the car from the inside out. So it's a car like this might have 50% new metal, something like that. So in some cases, all you're using the original metal for is pattern. You know, where he goes through the process of measuring all the curves and the radiuses and so forth of the car, and then uses that to make a new panel and weld it in. So 700 or 800 hours worth of work. So there's no fast way to do it. But all of these panels then would replicate the original panels. So when it's done, you wouldn't be able to tell a difference. But if you've ever wondered why restorations can cost $200,000 or $300,000, this is why. Because there's no getting around the kind of labor it takes to redo this properly. Nobody gets rich doing this, and you'd make way more money on repairing dented fenders on Honda Civics than you would doing this. So it's a real labor of love. But when this car is done, and it probably needs about 500 more hours, 400 more hours, something like that, it'll be a queen, and it's a wonderful car. 7-liter Iso Griffo. I think they called this a Can-Am car. So wonderful Italian American hybrid, and they didn't use a lot of rust proofing back then. So when you're restoring one of these cars, if this hasn't been done to it, it probably needs to be done to it. Anyway, tribute to Dave's skill that this car can be saved. Okay, so here's another gorgeous car. It's a Porsche Speedster, and so the story behind this, if I've got it right, I mean this is all just kind of off the hip, but I believe it was Max Hoffman who was the importer for Porsche in the 50s, and what he requested was a stripped out basic car that he could sell for a low price. So they would have deleted like the leather strap for the spare tires, and they would have come up with a really simple interior and and side screens, and basically tried to decontent the car and just sort of reduce it, right to its just the essence of a pure sports car. So that's something Porsche's been doing ever since, where they've perfected the art of taking equipment and weight out of a car and then charging more for it. And so they would have made the Speedsters in the mid 50s, 55 to 59 or something like that. And this is a 1957 example. Gorgeous paint. A really wonderful car. They would have had a couple of different engines. There was a 60 horsepower, and then there was a Super, which I believe was 75 horsepower, and then you could get really exotic and get the the Porsche roller bearing or the Hearth roller bearing crankshaft and get a 4-cam engine in it. And those cars would be really, really expensive, like several $100,000. But this is, this is the iconic bathtub Porsche Speedster. This is an original car, and one of the great post-war sports cars. Really magnificent example, and even at 60 horsepower, the car still feels quite sprightly, and there are loads of fun to drive, and it's really interesting to drive a light car. You just even if you drive really sort of advanced, modern, powerful cars that do all these great numbers, the joy of driving something that's light and nimble and that can change direction just kind of with a flick of the wrist is really quite special. So, early Porsche Speedster. I think this is a 60 horsepower version. Great looking car. Nobody else cares except for maybe the owners of these cars. You can buy them for next to nothing. But when I was a kid and I used to read about it, this is the car that I wanted. The ultimate 80s Grand Prix or Grand Touring cars. The one I like is the one that first came out in the 70s with the the psychedelic fluorescent orange upholstery. But I haven't owned one of these yet, but I'd like to. One day I will. I'll find a good one. And incredibly sophisticated for its day, incredibly stable chassis, good handling car, rear transaxle. It was developed, over a period of, whatever, 77 to 95 maybe. And the horsepower, I think, grew from, 240 when they came out, and then they got the 4-valve head. It was the 928, and then they got the 928S with more horsepower, and then they got the 4-valve head. And power went from 220, and then I think it got all the way up to about 340, standard and automatic transmissions. But the automatic suits the car just great. And car, if you're an enthusiast but don't have much money to buy the car, but can do some work yourself and research yourself, a 928 is, I think, a great choice. Parts aren't cheap though. Anyway, I really like these. And some German cars. These Mercedes were the S-classes, so the top of the line, well, not exactly the top of the line because they had the 600 limousine. And they would have come out, let me think about this, in the late 60s to early 70s. And then they would have been replaced by the, the 450 SEL. So we have two cars here that look exactly the same. That's a 450 SEL 4.5. And this one is the 6.3. So what they did is they took the... Go ahead, please.
Are you FaceTiming?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So they took the engine from the limo, which is called an M100 engine. Fantastically powerful, torquey engine. And then they put it in this relatively small car. And so this machine here is a really special example. 300 SEL 6.3. And it would have had... was it 250 horsepower and 435 pound-feet of torque or something like that. And in period, they used to say that guys in like Ferrari Daytonas couldn't outrun this car. It was I remember the Road and Track article where they had the drag strip, and I think it turned a time faster than the Corvette. So completely unsuspecting, square-rigged luxury sedan. But if you knew to look for that 6.3 badge, you knew you had something really special. This is a great car. I'd really like to have one of these. Great engine. So even in the 600, which I think was like 5,500 pounds or something like that. That car went 0 to 60 in under 10 seconds. So I think this is like 7 or something like that. But for the day, it was a real hot rod. I love the car.